I had always hoped that this land might become a safe and agreeable asylum to the virtuous and persecuted part of mankind, to whatever nation they might belong. George Washington. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you for giving me your time so early. Do me a favor, folks. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folk out there, hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. Okay. So, we're going to talk a little bit about immigration. Now, I'm going to warn you right up front. There's not going to be some like great insight necessarily today. Here's what caused me to think about this episode and to go this path is I've been watching content and I've been seeing, different social media comments, and there's a lot of discussion about like the great things that Trump's going to do for immigration and dealing with illegal immigration and how terrible Biden was. And, like about a week ago, I saw another one of those Jubilee videos. Remember the video that got me in all kind of trouble with YouTube from Jubilee? So I saw another one, and there was a lot of conversation about the asylum process and all, and whether or not um, legislation like the Remain in Mexico Act, whether those kind of things were good things, who's done better, was Trump, were things better under Trump, were things better under Biden, who's letting immigrants in, all the, just all this information. And it always helps to make sure that you have your facts correct. So sometimes you got to take a deep dive. So that's what I'm doing. I will be taking a bit of a deep dive, and I'm going to learn and then tell you what I learned. Now, here's why I'm doing this. um, because you might say, well, DL, don't you just keep up? Man, there's a lot of things to keep up with. And surely that there will be things that you learn that you didn't know, the same way that I learned that I didn't know. And the reason I'm doing this is because a long time ago, when I wanted to be a public speaker, this was before I even joined Toastmasters. This was before I even lived in Florida, actually. I was living in Charlotte. And what happened was I was part of the technology crowd. There was an organization called a Hackerspace that I helped found, and it's just basically a space where technologists and people that want to build things, creators and whatnot, creators of all kinds. So you could be a digital creator, you could be a physical creator. They had a hard space. You could go and you could do woodworking, you could do metalworking, all kind of stuff. You could build stuff. You could build robotics. You could learn programming. It's a really cool organization. So I was part of this organization, and they were always looking for people to come and speak and give talks. And they were like, "DL, why don't you give a talk?" And I was like, "No way." I was like, because some of these guys are like smart. Like they just like you could just be like, tell them a topic in technology and say, go. And then for like 30 minutes, they're just talking, like just nonstop, fast. And so like some of these guys are like crazy smart. I was like, what are you guys gonna learn from me? I'm new to this. Like I'm just barely getting my feet wet. And they were like, well, you got to think of it this way. When you give a speech as if you're talking to yourself maybe 6 months ago, because there's probably somebody who is basically you 6 months ago, right? Like there's somebody that you're talking to that didn't that doesn't that hasn't caught up yet, that haven't learned new information. There's always going to be that person. So I've always kept that in mind whenever I give public speeches, to kind of remind myself, because I've spoken in front of groups where there are people much smarter than me. And I assume that this podcast is the same, that there are people who are smarter than I am. But maybe because you have a busy life, you are also not nearly as informed as you might want to be, not think you are, or just maybe miss something, right? Like you're pretty informed, but hey, this went under my radar. I didn't know that. So hopefully over the next couple of days, and I don't know how many days I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do some deep dives, sort of deep dives. I mean, we're not, it's short podcast, short-ish. And it's not a documentary. So we're not, it's just going to be like, I'm reading and I'm going to learn stuff and I'm going to tell you guys what I learned. But let's start this off. Let's see. Let's start off with a comment here. I have immigrated to this live stream, and by doing so, I'm inherently benefiting the channel by my production of comments. That is true. And for anybody else who is immigrated to this podcast, you are all legal. It's just, I have decreed it. On this podcast, I am in fact the king. We have a monarchy here in this podcast. I'm the king, and I've decreed that anybody that is here is now legal. And anybody that comes here in the future will also be legal. All right, so let's talk about some comments. So what's kind of spurred this is, well, now Trump is president, and he's talking about, he's got these plans to deport, millions of people. And, people are cheering it. They're excited. And so I was just curious because for me, my vision of immigration is more Ellis Island. Like you come here, you say, I want to come into the United States. And we say, all right, are you a known criminal, a violent criminal? If you are, no, you don't get to come here. We don't want murderers and rapists, right? And armed robbers. Don't need that. Got plenty of our own. Don't need any extras, right? And then if you happen to have a communicable disease, a serious communicable disease, like if you're coming across the border and we like, hey, you got Ebola or something, right? Okay, well, maybe we not let you in until you get that resolved. With one exception there, if you are coming and maybe you have reached out to the Mayo Clinic and the Mayo Clinic said, hey, you come over here, we're going to take care of you. We've got some new experimental drugs. You're a willing participant. We're going to give these a shot, whatever the case is. In that particular case, well, now you have an established medical facility that's willing to take on the burden of ensuring the safety of you and everybody else that's, in this country. So that would be my immigration policy if you left it up to me. And then I would say, by the way, when you get here, there is no obligation, okay, other than to not harm you, right? Like that's our obligation, but we don't have to print things in your native language. We don't have to give you a job. You don't have to get welfare. You don't like there is no obligation. We let you in and you're on your own. Figure it out, right? Like that would be my immigration policy. So naturally, when Trump's talking about deporting millions of Americans, kind of perks my ear up. When he talks about using the military, that really perks my ear up. So I have to like really pay attention and be like, wait a minute, what? We're going to use the military? How are we planning to use the military? So I made this comment on Twitter, and let me put it up on the screen here so that you can see it. And then I want to play some of the responses back because I'm not sure if the bots out there aren't very good or if maybe the people like these are actually people and they're not very bright. I really can't decide. Like maybe the bots just gotta, the AI's got to work on its responses or the humans need to work on their comprehension. So let's take a look here. All right. So this is what I said. I said, name the last time federal government declared a national emergency and civil liberties weren't violated. Libertarians spent years decrying militarized police. Americans still have militarized police and may now see the military. Expect more images like this. And then I showed this image here. Pause it real quick. So this is the image in back in like what 2000. Elian Gonzalez, the little kid that came over from Cuba. So his mom and his dad were separated in Cuba. She had her new boyfriend. She decided to leave Cuba with her boyfriend and her son. They were on a boat. Storm came. The engine went out on the boat, and then the boat sank, and they managed to get Elian and maybe a couple of other people onto a small raft, and everybody else, his mother and his mother's boyfriend as well, died. The bodies were never recovered. And so then Elian came over here. He ended up staying with some relatives. And then there was a big fight because the dad in Cuba was like, well, I want my son back. And the relatives were like, no, he should be here. So there's this big dispute. Now, what I was getting at here was I was like, expect to see more images like this of an armed man basically pointing. I mean, it might not be pointing it directly at the kid, but from this picture, it kind of looks that way, right? But expect more images. Like if we do a mass deportation of millions of people, you will see more images like this. That and that's not a that is reality. So that's what I said. So let's go back to some of the comments here because I thought the comments were quite amusing. So we got here, it says one Cuban kid's custody issue, not a national emergency. Okay, but what I'm doing is I'm saying if we happen to do this one issue times 20 million or 12 million or 15 million or even 1 million, right? You are going to see more pictures. I'm not sure how that wasn't understood. Let's see. Fear mongering at its finest, I see. Figures. That's the tactic. Is it really fear mongering? Again, back to that last comment. So they were like, well, this is just one instance, right? We're talking about millions of people. So again, if we got that picture from one instance, what pictures might we expect to see after millions? This is not fear mongering. This is reality, right? Just kind of doing the math, I guess. All right, what's next? Poco yo say bye bye. I'm not even sure what that means. I took literally 1 year of Spanish and I slept through half of it because I was a standard American student. So I have no idea what you're saying there, buddy. Just like, by the way, when I was in high school in New Paris, Ohio, you could look it up. It's a tiny little town. And I went to National Trail High School and some dudes wanted to fight me. And at the time I had hair and people often thought I was Mexican and they would yell profanities in Spanish at me, trying to incite me to fight. It's kind of like saying, your mom's a this, or why are you being a little bee, those kind of thing. But they were yelling it in Spanish. And I was like, bro, I've been sleeping in that class. I don't know what you're saying. And I'm not Spanish. Although technically I am Spaniard. But anyway, beside the point, what's next here? Low bratarians did nothing. Well, we can't decide as libertarians, did we sway the election or did we do nothing? I don't know. It just depends on who you're talking to. No consistency there. I love this one. Don't break the law. No cops will be knocking at your door. Have you not seen media in the last ever? This happens all the time. Well, you don't even break the law. The police knock at your door. I mean, I can dig up like 30 videos in like 20 minutes right now. All right. That is, unless you're a Democrat, then you knock on doors of citizens because your party is nothing but pure evil. Oh, so I'm a Democrat now. Is that what's going on here? I'm a Democrat. So maybe my party is evil. Okay. Well, I'm not a Democrat. I'm a libertarian or a low bratarian, as the poster said. See, this is the funny thing about comments. Like you get in their comments and people are like, they're trying to make me angry, but I can't help but laugh because one comment calls me a low bratarian, making fun of libertarians. And the next one's calling me a Democrat. So which is it? I don't even know. Can you guys make up your mind? Now, this comment here, I think is the most telling. It's like perfection. Mwah. No, you can't keep 20 million illegal future Democrat voters to flip the country permanently. No amount of crying children on TV, pictures, or crying by people like you on social media will change this. They can GTFO. Nobody cares. Also, we need to defund all aid to non-citizens. So I will take it a step further there, Rick James, Thomas WH78. We need to defund all aid to everyone because that aid comes from stolen money. So if you are an American citizen, as I am, you shouldn't get any aid either because that aid comes from my pocket and you don't belong having that money because I don't want you to have it, especially since you can't even read. Like, why would I want to give my money to somebody who can't even read a post and discern what I'm saying versus what I'm not saying? But that's not the really telling part here. The really telling part here is I think, I think it was not about, I don't think it was about anything that people have cried about. I think it was really about, hey, all these illegal immigrants might actually be they might become part of the party that I oppose. I think that might actually be really what's under people's skin. Like, and I made a comment. Let me see if I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but I can pull up this comment really quickly that I made in response to that. So let me read to you what I said because I thought it was enlightening. I said, if hazarding a guess, the real problem people have is fear illegal immigrants may vote for the opposition party. I'll go further and say such people exploit names of the deceased, but care about them as much as Destiny said he didn't. Your honesty is appreciated. Now, the reference to Destiny there is if you don't know, Destiny's a streamer and he's on video somewhere saying that he didn't care about the Trump supporter that was killed, remember, in the assassination attempt. And he was like, yeah, I don't care about him. Right. Like, I think he was at least being honest. But I think this tweet right here, this response to me, this is what a lot of people, now I'm not going to say most, I'm not going to say all, but I will say quite a few. I think quite a few people, the real problem with immigration is that they just don't want potential voters in the opposite party. That's it. I don't think they really care about people that have been harmed by violent illegal immigrants or violent immigrants, to put it that way, because somebody could come over here legally and still be violent. I don't think they care about that. They might use it, they might say it, but I think what they really care about is, are you going to be on team B? Because I'm on team A and I don't like you if you're on team B. Why do I say that? Think about all the comments in here that were related to what party I was a part of, right? Then they're not addressing the question, which is, are we going to see more images of armed soldiers being pointed at little children? That's the real question. We're going to see more of that. I prefer not to. I don't really like pointing firearms at children. Call me crazy. All right, what's next? If true, this is kind of funny. That's crazy. Haitians are going to hide in black neighborhoods. It will be a nightmare. I'm not even going to touch that one, but that could be interesting. Biden stomped all over our liberties when he let these people waltz over. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Now our country is a mess. Oh, now it is. It wasn't a mess before Biden or before Trump or before Obama. No, it wasn't a mess then. It wasn't a mess when we got the Patriot Act. It wasn't a mess, when like the DHS and the IRS started amassing millions of rounds of bullets. Remember that? Remember that story back in like 2016? No, it wasn't a mess then. It wasn't a mess when the IRS went after specific groups or when we had the IRS at all. That didn't create the country into a mess. No, it was a mess after Biden. Like, it's like people have short-term memories. Like, the world started with the last tyrant that you didn't like. That's when the world started. Okay. Let's see what we got. What you will actually see is mock outrage and inorganic mobs, Antifa losing their minds in the streets while the adults clean up the mess that the children of the previous admin caused. Elian Gonzalez was one kid. We've got 20 million to deport. So again, it's like we're only capable of seeing at the last administration that we didn't like. That's as far back as we like to go, because I guess that's the voter memories that we've got. But also, again, if one kid can generate this picture, how many will 20 million? Like, is anybody thinking, like, are we going to actually have the stomach for this? I'm feeling like we're not. Even the hardcore conservatives, I think they're going to be like, maybe this wasn't a good idea. I'm telling you. All right. They kidnapped that kid in violation of custody agreement and brought him here. Isn't he married with kids in Cuba now? He is in Cuba, and I can't remember. I think he's an engineer. Whether they kidnapped him is not relevant, people. It's like, this is a funny part about social media is like people will just answer something that doesn't even have anything to do with what you said. Take that up with your president. He's the one who caused this, so don't get mad at Trump for having to clean it up. So let's be clear. Trump is my president. Biden was my president, or is currently. Trump will be. Trump was my president. Obama was my president, right? So on and so forth. Like every president that has been elected in my lifetime was my president, whether I voted for them or not. So I don't play this your president, my president game, right? We all have the same president right now. And next in January, we're all going to have a new president, whether you like it or not. That's the way it is. It's craziness. All right. What do we got here? Yeah. I want to see this happening in every city, every town, every state until we have rid ourselves of these invaders. Send them back where they belong and remove any chance of future citizenship. Interesting. I'm going to get to that. I'm just hoping the war caused from trying to deport 16 to 20 million people will be huge and bloody. It's going to be fun. Okay, so you are a psycho, and I don't want you anywhere near me. Okay, folks, so those are some of the comments. Now, as you can see, like nobody really actually addressed, like, hey, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with 20 million pictures like this, right? Like I'm okay with pointing guns at kids. Nobody really said that. They just wanted to talk about who's on whose team. Okay, well, I don't care what team you're on, right? Like there are ideas, and either they're a good idea or they're a bad idea. But let's watch this video here real quick. I got a news clip, and we're gonna take a look at this, and then we're gonna just kind of start walking our way through some things that have been happening with immigration over time. So here we go.
2 months from now, President-elect Donald Trump will be getting ready to take the oath of office. Today, he posted on his social media that it is true he plans to declare a national emergency and use the military for a mass deportation program. NBC6 politics reporter Hatzel Vela is live now with what immigration attorneys are saying about the effects right here for South Florida. Hatzel.
Jackie, these are two different attorneys who know this community well, and tonight have a stark warning, especially for Haitians and Nicaraguans who are here under Biden's humanitarian parole program. President-elect Donald Trump has vowed that on day one, his administration will restrict immigration and ramp up deportations. Two immigration attorneys we talked to say this will immediately affect South Florida, as Trump is expected to end the parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. All those groups have the largest exile communities right here in South Florida.
More people are going to go to trial. More people are going to be deported.
Immigration attorney Willie Allen says our community does not realize the kind of impact this will have on local families.
I'm not worried about Cubans because we have the Cuban Adjustment Act.
Cubans are the only group in the U.S. who, by law, can legalize in a year and a day. Allen's also not too worried about Venezuelans, as some are protected by temporary protective status through April of 2025.
Who am I worried about? Number one, Haitians. The Haitians were the one group that had the most entries with the humanitarian parole.
He's right. Through the end of September, the Department of Homeland Security says nearly 214,000 Haitians have arrived in the U.S. through the parole program. Venezuelans are the second highest number, with nearly 121,000 granted parole. Cubans come in third place with more than 110,000 who have arrived under the program, and more than 96,000 Nicaraguans have used it.
Okay, so let's pause that for just a second. We'll go back to those numbers here really quickly. So we've got 214,000 Haitians, 121,000 Venezuelans, 110,000 Cubans, and 96,000 Nicaraguans. So that's like a little over 500,000 there. So where are the other like 15? Who are the other 15.5 million? Who are they? Where are they coming from? Now, this isn't supposed to be an exhaustive number, but I think people really need to consider, like, exactly who are they? And are any of them people that we would actually want to come over. People that, and when I say want, let's try to level set here. Let's say by want, we mean somebody that's going to come over here. They're not a violent criminal. They're not going to spread any really serious disease, and they're going to contribute to our society, right? In some way. Maybe they'll come over, maybe they'll work in agriculture, maybe they'll start a plumbing business, maybe they'll become an engineer, who knows? But they will come over here and they will contribute just like we expect every American to contribute, even though they all don't. But we have that expectation, right? And so the question is, like, how many of these people are not contributing in the way that we want? I mean, isn't that ultimately the goal? The goal should be to have in a somewhat assimilated society, assimilated enough, right? Like, you don't have to come over here. You don't have to come over here and learn English. But if you come over here and you're making your own way, let's just take the more stereotypical route, since we're talking about a lot of people from South and Central America here. If you take and say, like, you come over here and you are a house cleaner, but you speak very broken English, but you clean houses, you pay your bills, you go to the store, you buy some food, and you're otherwise a good member of society. What's the problem there? Does anybody actually really have a problem with that person? So how many in this 500,000 people for the humanitarian parole program fit that bill? How many in the 16 to 20 million people that we're talking about deporting, how many fit that bill? Right? Like, what do we actually want? I think is the real question here. All right, let's continue on.
6,000 Nicaraguans have used it.
The argument would be that he could do away with the program, but the people who are already here have a 2-year window to stay here.
But that 2-year window is coming to a close, leaving hundreds of thousands of people in legal limbo and possible deportation orders.
Starting in 2026, a lot of people will not have any status, and people are panicking, and they have a reason to panic because they don't see a future.
In the case of Haiti, these are immigrants who now don't see a future here or in Haiti.
Haiti right now is going through a lot. We have gang infesting areas. We have a lot of murders, and they are worried that they will be sent to their death.
That's quite a statement. Both attorneys agree the effects of mass deportations go beyond these communities or these groups here in South Florida. They say expect significant impact on our local economy, which relies heavily on immigrants who work in agriculture, construction, and many other sectors. Reporting live from the newsroom, I'm Hat Safala.
Okay, so it's true. Like, this is going to have a significant impact. And the real question is, are we actually prepared for it? Or are people just running off at the mouth and have no clue what they're talking about? I'm going to go ahead and wager it's the latter, that a lot of people don't really know nearly what they're talking about. That doesn't mean that there isn't a problem, right? That's not to say that. I think there is a problem. I think personally that the immigration policy that we have in the United States is onerous and difficult. And it really incentivizes people to just sneak over the border. Because if you're poor in another country, and we all know this, being poor in America is not the same as being poor in Mexico or El Salvador or wherever, right? You could be really, really poor and you don't have resources. So if we raise the bar and we say, well, here's all these hurdles that you have to overcome in order to come here, well, then for those people who cannot overcome those hurdles because there's financial issues or whatever, they're going to be incentivized to sneak across the border. We are creating a black market, which is kind of weird because libertarians tend to make the argument that when you have more regulation, you create more black markets. When you remove regulation, you disincentivize the black markets from existing. Now, that doesn't mean that there will never be a black market, but you can really put a dent in it. Same applies to immigration. You increase the regulation of the rules, you make it more difficult, you incentivize a black market. That means coyotes or whomever trying to smuggle people across the border. because people want to come here. All right, so let's talk about this humanitarian parole. And I found a couple articles, and they're actually old. They're from 2023. So one is from October and one is from May. So we're going to look at this AP article, and we're going to see. Just curious, maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't. Let me address a couple comments here. So Time Surfing Alien asked, how many citizens will be misidentified as illegal? This is my big concern. This is why I made the statement that I did about when was the last time that the United States implemented a national emergency and some innocent, some civil liberties were not violated, on part of at least the citizens, but maybe non-citizens as well, because we do have people here that are here legally. We do not want them to get caught up in the dragnet in, seeking out illegal immigrants. So and some of these people may have changed their nationality. They may have naturalized. And so now if they've naturalized relatively recently, what's the system going to look like? How is it going to be implemented? And how are we going to ensure that American citizens and legal immigrants are not caught up in this? And nobody really seems to have that answer. And I think that's a big problem. If you're going to partake in a huge operation like this, then you need to make sure that American citizens, at the very least, American citizens aren't going to be caught up in it. But then I think it's beneficial for us to make sure that legal immigrants aren't going to be caught up on this. Now, personally, I would go further and say anybody that's not, like, if your only crime is that you crossed the border without permission, but otherwise you're a contributing member of society, I'm not really looking to remove you either. Because other than that one thing, if you are a contributing member of society, you are the kind of person that I want. And if you are desperate enough to come over here and do so illegally, but then remain legal while you're kind of in this black market area, well, then I want to bring you out into the light and say, hey, welcome to America. Great. I'm glad you're a contributing member, just like many other people that are contributing members. That's what I want. So I think the problem that we're facing in this country is that we haven't really come to terms with what is it that we really want. And I think it's just really this argument of what is legal, what it's not. But people aren't really looking at what do we've got? What do we have out there? What does our immigration look like? What are the policies that, say, the Biden era have implemented? So let's take a look at one of those such policies. And then I'll come back to another comment here. All right, so here we are. The AP Title 42 has ended. Here's what it did and how immigration policy is changing. Okay, so let's see here. What is Title 42 and what did it do? Scroll in, zoom in on this a little bit, make it a little bigger for you. All right, Title 42 is the name of an emergency health authority. It was a holdover from President Donald Trump's administration, began in March 2020. The authority allowed U.S. officials to turn away migrants who came to the U.S.-Mexico border on the grounds of preventing the spread of COVID-19. All right, let's stop right here. People that supported Trump overwhelmingly were critical of COVID-19. They were overwhelming. This group of people that supported Trump, they were like, hey, the lockdowns were wrong. The mandates were wrong. A lot of them will say the vaccine, was, a nightmare. It caused all kind of problems. They'll say things like, it was just a cold, right? Like, COVID was just a cold. It varies depending on who you're talking to. But for most people, they objected to all things COVID-19. So if you rejected all of those, you should reject Title 42 as well, because it only existed on the basis of COVID-19 and on the basis of preventing the spread, for which most of you people being the Trump supporters, most of you said, hey, it's not really a big deal. It's the flu. It's the cold. You'll get over it. maybe the old people, we can kind of segregate them a little bit because they seem to be a little bit more susceptible. Maybe we give out the vaccine to people who are particularly unhealthy and we know have higher rates of catching COVID and being hospitalized from it. You know, people that have high blood pressure, people that have diabetes, people that are overweight. Those groups of people were at higher risk of not only contracting COVID, but also being hospitalized. So maybe you can have the vaccine, but otherwise we don't like it. But no, somehow Trump was all good with this. See, this is what I mean, that I don't know that we're really that informed of an electorate. All right, continuing on. Before that, migrants could cross illegally, ask for asylum, and be allowed into the U.S. They were then screened and often released to wait out their immigration cases. So that's what happened before we did Title 42. Under Title 42, migrants were returned over the border and denied the right to seek asylum. U.S. officials turned away migrants more than 2.8 million times. Families and children traveling alone were exempt. But there were no real consequences when someone illegally crossed the border. So migrants were able to try again and again to cross on the off chance that they would get into the U.S. So that's a summary of what Title 42 did. So it let families and children come here. And then it said, all right, we're just gonna kick you across the border. And if you try to come back, we'll kick you across again. And so they were incentivized to keep trying because there was no punishment for it. So let's see. The Biden administration has put into place a series of new policies cracking down on illegal crossings. That's interesting. It's not the narrative I was told. I was told I'm a Democrat who supported Biden, who just let them flood in. The administration says it's trying to stop people from paying smuggling operations to make a dangerous and often deadly journey. Now there will be strict consequences. Migrants caught crossing illegally will not be allowed to return for 5 years and can face criminal prosecution if they do. Well, wait a minute. So Trump implemented Title 42, which said we're going to turn you away repeatedly if we have to. And then when Title 42 was ended, then the new Biden administration, not the new Biden, but the Biden administration, they said, well, we're going to implement a rule that says we're going to turn you away and we're going to document that we've turned you away. And if you come back, if we catch you again, you can be prosecuted. And then if you're caught crossing illegally, you'll also not be permitted to come back for 5 years. So if you come here illegally, we're going to kick you out, document you. You might get criminal prosecution, or at best case scenario, we're going to kick you out for 5 years. You cannot even follow the right path for 5 years. That's what the Biden administration did. So that's interesting. New asylum rules. People from all over the world travel to the U.S.-Mexico border to seek asylum. They are screened to determine whether they have a credible fear of persecution in their homeland. Their case then goes to the immigration court system to determine if they can stay in the U.S., but that process can take years. Usually they are released into the U.S. to wait out their cases. The Biden administration is now turning away anyone seeking asylum who didn't first seek protection in a country they traveled through or first applied online. So let me read that again, because that is not what I was told. The Biden administration is now turning away anyone seeking asylum who didn't first seek protection in a country they traveled through or first applied online. So there's a website that you can apply. And if they didn't apply there to the US, or they didn't try to at least get protection in the country they came through, then nope, you get turned away. But that doesn't sound like the Biden administration just allowing migrants left and right. Now, there might have been other policies that were more open, right? But these are the kind of things that we have to know about because we want to be informed, correct? I mean, that's what I think. Who's allowed in? The U.S. has said it will accept up to 30,000 people per month from Venezuela, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Cuba, as long as they come by air, have a sponsor, and apply online first. So there's your criteria for coming in. So now, will these 30,000 people, and this was like per month, so whatever, take a month, the 30,000 people that came in during that month, they had a sponsor, they applied online first. So they followed the path that the administration set out. Will those people be caught up in the dragnet in the attempt to deport people? Let me rephrase that in a different way. Did we invite people to come in, give them a path to do so, and then later going to turn around and deport them because we're gung-ho on kicking people out of the country? Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, I feel like everybody can get on board by saying that is wrong. It's wrong to invite somebody and then kick them out later under the guise of you're not here legally, you're a bad person, whatever nonsense we come up with. Just seems wrong. All right, the government will also allow up to 100,000 people from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras into the U.S. who have family here, if they too apply online. Border officials will otherwise deport people, including turning 30,000 people per month from Venezuela, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Cuba, who will be sent back over the border to Mexico. So this is a plan of limiting migration and telling people you have to follow the path, otherwise we're not letting you in. It's not exactly the narrative that I'm getting. But again, the narrative, as we'll see, not today necessarily, but if I come across evidence that the narrative is that Biden was letting thousands and millions of people in, then I'll tell you. But right now, just on my first glance, just starting down this rabbit hole, I'm finding that he actually implemented policies that were stronger than at least some of the policies that Trump had. But that's not what we're being told. All right, so what happened there? All right, so let's take a look. The American Immigration Council, this was in October of 2023, the Biden administration's humanitarian parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans in overview. On January 5th, 2023, the Biden administration announced its intent to provide, quote, safe and orderly pathways to the United States, end quote, for up to 30,000 nationals of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. The new program, formerly known as the Process for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans, allows certain people from these four countries who have a sponsor in the U.S. and who pass a background check to come to the U.S. for a period of 2 years to live and work lawfully using a legal mechanism known as humanitarian parole. Migrants are ineligible for the parole program if they crossed without authorization into Panama, following the most common route to the United States, Mexico, or the United States after the relevant parole program was announced, October 19th, 2022 for Venezuelan nationals, January 9th, 2023 for Cubans, Haitians, and Nicaraguans. As of April 2023, Cubans and Haitians are also ineligible if they are interdicted at sea while attempting to cross the Caribbean to the United States without authorization. So again, this program has requirements that must be met. So under who is eligible for the humanitarian parole program, you have to be a national of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, or Venezuela, or the immediate relative of a national of one of those countries who is applying for the program. You have to have a supporter of the United States who has filed a declaration of financial support on behalf of the applicant and has been approved by USCIS. I know a little bit about the Declaration of Financial Support. My wife is a naturalized citizen from Indonesia. When her father passed away and then her brother passed away, her mother was alone. So we had to bring her mother over here to live with us. We had to fill out a declaration of financial support. It was basically us saying, we have the means to support this person. That's what it is if you're not familiar with it. but I am, because we had to show them that we had the money, the finances to take care of her. We had to do a lot, actually, and it was a great deal of effort. Can pay their own way into a U.S. airport. That's another requirement. Has been vaccinated for measles, polio, and COVID-19. So you had to be vaccinated, whether you agree with the vaccines or not, and has passed all biographical and security background checks. So if you wanted to come in under the humanitarian parole program, here's your list of requirements. You had to be vaccinated. Somebody had to vouch for you. They had to say, I have the money to pay for this person. That way we're attempting to prevent freeloaders. Now, who is not eligible? Well, if you failed to pass a national security and public safety vetting, or you do not merit a favorable exercise of discretion by the Department of Homeland Security. Presumably, they might look at your case and say, this is an exception. So if they don't find a reason to give you an exception and you don't pass the vetting, then no. If you've been ordered removed from the United States within the past 5 years, or are subject to another bar to entry based on a prior removal order. So if you've already tried to cross and we caught you and we documented and then kicked you out and said, you got to wait 5 years, or, you fall under some other criteria, you're not eligible. If you unlawfully crossed the United States, Mexico, or Panama border after October 19th, 2022, or January 2023, that's so they're differentiating between countries here, or were interdicted at sea after April 27, 2023. So depending on which country you come from, there's a particular date that applies to you starting in 2022. Or if you're considered an unaccompanied child under United States law. So this is the criteria. This is what the Biden administration did. Now, who can become a supporter? Because maybe that's important, right? Like, who gets to support you if you want to come over? Well, U.S. citizens, obviously, lawful permanent residents, lawful temporary residents, and conditional permanent residents. So basically, legal migrants. Then there's non-immigrants in a lawful status, such as a temporary worker, international student, diplomat, or temporary visitor for business or pleasure. Asylees, refugees, and parolees. Recipients of temporary protected status. Beneficiaries of deferred action, including deferred action for childhood arrivals and deferred enforced departure. So basically, if you're here legally, whether you're a citizen or you fall under one of the many categories of legal residents from another country, you are somebody that can sponsor somebody coming over here. So you have to be legal, and you have to file paperwork and say, I got the money. I'm going to take care of this person or these persons. I got it covered. Then last here, so the question is, how does the humanitarian parole program differ from previous uses of parole under the Biden administration? To begin with, while there were no explicit maximums under the Afghan or Ukrainian parolees, this program accepts only 30,000 people into the United States per month, a fairly low number given that 7 million Venezuelans alone have already fled their home country. So 7 million people fled, and we're like, yeah, 30,000 can come in at a time at most. So this is the information that we have here. And I don't know if you knew this. Maybe some of you are much more informed than I am. But so far, I'm not seeing clear evidence that the Biden administration was just allowing people to pour in, but they actually implemented actual policy, right? We're not talking about under my administration, we did this. It's here is the policy that we had, that we implemented. And here's how it differs from policies that we had prior. Now, the next thing to do, which we can cover in future episodes, is what did those numbers end up looking like? What other policies were in play? So on and so forth. Let me answer this question here that I thought was really interesting. So it says, Liberty Dad, can you talk about the voluntarism way community will help lower income people that need aid? Most people can't begin to wrap their head around abolishing all federal aid to citizens. Okay, so that was in regard to a comment that I made earlier. So somebody had said in one of the tweets to me, they said, hey, you know what? We should abolish, paraphrasing, they said we should abolish all aid to, all non-citizens or something like that. And I extended it and I said, We should abolish all aid to everybody. Okay. Because the government is, one, they shouldn't be taking our money. Number two, they have historically been very poor at deciding how to spend that money. If you ever wonder, like, just go look up things like the $800 hammer and other things where they've spent money and you're like, how did it get to this point? How did you spend this much money? Go look at California, who spent $24 billion that they can't even account for because they stopped tracking it. Amazing. They stopped tracking, and $24 billion cannot be accounted for, but was supposed to be spent to deal with the homelessness problem. And their homelessness problem was reported to have risen by 50%. Okay. So there should be no doubt in your mind that government cannot spend money well. So to answer this question, how will voluntarism, how does that help lower income people? Easy. I'll tell you one example that we can all identify with right away. Have you ever been looking for a job and somebody says, hey man, I know somebody that works at this place. Why don't you go put in an application and I'll put in a word for you. That's how, through networking and through connections, talking to people using their connections to help out somebody else. That, like, right there. And I've had that happen to me. I've had people say, hey, go in and fill out an application. And I think one time I was told to put their name on my application, like who referred you or something like that. And then when I called them to say, yeah, I was referred by so-and-so, or to even ask for a specific person and say, hey, I'm looking for Mr. Jones. Mr. Smith sent me. And they might go, oh, you know Mr. Smith? Yes, I do. Oh, he's great. And so then what they do is they say, because Mr. Jones knows Mr. Smith and feels confident that Mr. Smith isn't going to send them some dud, then they're going to now elevate my status a little bit. And so that gives me a little bit of a leg up. What are other ways that can help? Churches galore have food banks. They have clothing banks, and a lot of it's free. Sometimes the free means you got to listen to a sermon, right? So you sit down and churches will say, all right, we'll feed you, but first you got to hear us talk about some Jesus. Well, guess what? If you want some free food, hearing about Jesus doesn't seem like a bad trade-off, even if you're an atheist. If you're hungry, listen up, right? Like, because people want to give you something, but they also want to make sure that they're giving you more, like they're giving you some potential spiritual assistance. Other ways that people could help out. If I have the money, I could hire somebody to come and work for me. People have done that before, like, hey, you're down on your luck. I can't really help you out, but not in any significant way. But hey, I've been needing some work done. Can you come and do this work for me? And I'll pay you what I can for the work. Or in some cases, people just donate. How many times have you seen online where somebody puts up like a GoFundMe and they say, hey man, I just had this terrible accident happen to me. My insurance is only covering this much. The bills are going to be this much. I can't afford it. Can people please help me out? And you get some more liberal people, and I've seen them. They're like, oh, I can't believe it. In a country like this, people are asking for help. Yes, that's a good thing. It is a good thing that if I were down on my luck and I were to put out the word, and then all my audience said, man, Liberty Dad's a great dude, and he normally can sustain himself, but right now he's down on his luck. Everybody throw in $5, right? And they get 1,000 people to throw in $5. So now I get $5,000 from the help of the community. And so now maybe that 5,000 would be sufficient to help me get back on my feet and move right along and continue being that good dude that everybody assisted. That is how voluntarism would work in this country. And the way that we can best do that is to make sure that we have the most money available to us in the first place. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if you're taxing the crap out of me, and I've got I'm making maybe a decent amount of money, but I'm still kind of week to week, paycheck to paycheck. If I'm still living paycheck to paycheck, I can't help other people. So if the government stops taking my money, for which they're very good at wasting, then I can better manage my money. And maybe I'll have enough to get out of paycheck to paycheck. Maybe I won't. But if I do, then maybe I will also pay it forward and say, you know what? Once upon a time, I was down on my luck. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you 25 bucks. It's all I got, but that's what I can do for right now. And for that person who needs a leg up, needs a little assistance, $25 is better than $0. So that's how, hopefully that answers the question satisfactorily. Let's take a look at some other comments in here. Yes, I agree. Now there it is. So here's this comment says, won't be recovered as long as R&D, not research and development, because clearly Republicans, Democrats don't do any of that. But it will not be recovered as long as R&D are in DC. So what are we talking about? Well, perhaps it can be recovered, says Keith Garrett. And going back, let's see here. We are not free. We are possibly freer, but we have allowed our liberty to be diminished almost to zero. It's sad that we are not smart enough, courageous enough to keep it. That is correct. Last comment, last statement before I close out the show. When Benjamin Franklin came out of the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman. She said, "What, sir, have you given us?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." And that's true, if we can keep it. And keep it doesn't necessarily mean deporting people. It would mean making sure that people that are here are productive members of society and are not having their money taken from them and then wasted, so that we could create a society that understands helping out one another. But in order to help out one another, we got to have something to help out people with. If I'm living paycheck to paycheck because the government's wasting all my money, sending it all over the place, then I can't help out somebody, even if I want to. I mean, maybe I could and just put myself into a problem, but that's not good. And that's not what we want. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show, found it informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.